Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paschachadi Shatarane. Now we will chant the Sri Isopnisad. Can the host put it on the screen? Is Janak with us today?
Oh, yeah. Om Purnamadam Purnat Purnamadityate Purnat Purnapanusyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Ishavashamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena chaktena bundita magridha kashyasvedhanam kurvanevaha karmani jijivashechchatam samaha evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare.
One pillar of this
Soyanama te loka andena tamasavrita tamste precha bigajanti yeke chatma hano janaha. Anijarekam manasoja viyo naina deva pnuvam purvam harshat tadhavatonyana chiteti tistat tasminapo matarishva dadati tarejati tadnaijati tad dure tad bantike tadantarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasya shabayataha yastu sarvani bhutani atmani evanupashyati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tatona vijagupshate. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmaiva buddhijanataha tatra ko mohaka shoka ekatvam anupashyataha. Saparyajachukram makayam avrinam ashnaviram shudham apapavidam kavir manishi paribu swayambur yata tachitoridam vyada tach chastitibhya samabhyaha. Andham tama pravishanti ye vidyam upasate tato bhuyevate tamo ya uvidyayam rataha. I think I'm saying it different. Anyadevahur vidyaya anyadahur avidyaya iti shushumadhiranam yenastad vichachakshire. Vidyam cha yas tadvedo bhayam saha avidyayam ritum tirtva vidyayam ritam ashnute. Andham tama pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya evate tamo yau sambhucham rataha. Anyad evahu sambhavad anyad ahur sambhavat iti shushumadhiranam yenastadvi chachakshire. Sambhutim cha vinasham cha yastadvedo bhayam saha vinashenam ritum tirtva sambhucham ritam ashnute. Hiranmayena patrena satyasha pihitam mukam tatvam pushana parinu satya dharmaya drishtaye. Pushane karsha yama surya prajapatya vyuha rasmin samuha tejo yate rupam kalyanam tamam tate pashami Vayuranilam amritam matedam basmantam shariram. Om Krato smara kritam smara. Krato smara kritam smara. Agnenaya supataraye yasman vishvani deva vayunani vidvan. Yayorya smajtu hurana meno. Uyishtam te nama uktim videma. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachite Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Okay, today we are on mantra 10. Moving right along. You want to put mantra 10 on the screen? Thank you. Anyadeva hor vidyaya. You want to
Ahur avidyaya vidyaya
Anyad ahur avidyaya.
anyadahur avidyaya
Iti shushuma dhiranam.
iti sushrumatirana
Ekadvicha chakshire.
yenastat vichachakshire
Anyad eva hor vidyaya.
anyadevahur vidyaya
Anyad ahur avidyaya.
anyadahur avidyaya
Iti shushuma dhiranam.
iti sushrumatirana
Ekadvicha chakshire.
yenastat vichachakshire
Anyad eva hor vidyaya.
anyadevahur vidyaya
Anyad ahur avidyaya.
anyadahur avidyaya
Shushuma
iti sushrumatirana
Yena stadvicha chakshire.
yenastat vichachakshire
Someone else like to chant?
Anyad evahur vidyaya.
anyadevahur vidyaya
Anyad ahur avidyaya.
anyadahur avidyaya
Iti shushrumadhiranam.
iti sushrumadhiranam
Yenastadvicha chakshire.
yenastat vichachakshire
Anyat eva hurvidyaya.
anyadevahur vidyaya
Nyadahur avidayaya.
anyadahur avidyaya
Iti susrumadhiranam.
iti sushrumadhiranam
Yena stadvichakashriye.
yenastat vichachakshire
Anyat eva hurvidyaya.
anyadevahur vidyaya
Nayadahur avidyaya.
anyadahur avidyaya
Iti sushramadittanam.
iti sushrumadhiranam
Yena tadvikaka vichasakshire.
yenastat vichachakshire
Anyad evahor vidyaya.
anyadevahur vidyaya
Nyad ahur avidyaya.
nyadahur avidyaya
Iti shushrumadhiranam.
iti sushrumadhiranam
Enastad vichachakshire.
yenastat vichachakshire
Anyone else? Anyat.
anyat
Different.
different
Eva.
eva
Certainly.
certainly
Ahu.
aho
Said.
said
Vidyaya.
vidyaya
A culture of knowledge.
the culture of knowledge
Anyat.
anyat
Different.
different
Ahu.
aho
Said.
said,
Avidyaya,
avidyaya,
by culture of nescience.
by culture of nations,
Iti,
iti,
thus.
thus,
Shushuma,
sushuma,
I heard.
I
I
heard
Dhiranam,
dhiranam,
from the sober.
from
from the sober,
Yea,
ye,
who?
who,
Naha,
naha,
to us.
to us,
Tat,
tat,
that.
that,
Vichachakshire,
vichachakshire,
explained.
explained.
Translation. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As advised in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, 13:8 through 12, one should culture knowledge in the following way. 1. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. 2. One should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. 3. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. 4. One should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. 5. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. 6. One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who could lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. And one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. 7. In order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. 8. One must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. 9. One should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. 10. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. 11. One should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body, nor should one consider those who are related to this body to be his own. 12. One should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. 13. One should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement. 14. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordain. 15. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables or undesirables, knowing that such feelings are just created by the mind. 16. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and serve him with rapt attention. 17. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere, favorable for spiritual culture, and one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. 18. One should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. Someone else like to read?
These 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for those, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nescience. Srila Bhaktivinod Thakur, a great acharya, maintained that all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy, and that by culturing them, one becomes no better than an ass. The same principle is found here in Sri Isopnisad. By advancement of material knowledge, modern man is simply being converted into an ass. Some materialistic politicians in spiritual guise decry the present system of civilization as satanic. But unfortunately, they do not care about the culture of real knowledge as it is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Thus, they cannot change the satanic situation. In the modern society, even a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men due to the wrong type of education being imparted in our universities. Boys all over the world are given their elders headaches. Thus, Sri Isopnisad very strongly warns that the culture of nescience, the boys all over the world are giving their elders headaches. Thus, Sri Isopnisad very strongly warns that the culture of nescience is different from that of knowledge. The universities are, so to speak, centers of nescience only. Consequently, scientists are busy discovering lethal weapons to wipe out the existence of other countries. University students today are not given instructions in the regulative principles of brahmacharya, celibate student life, nor do they have any faith in any scriptural injunctions. Religious principles are taught for the sake of name and fame only, and not for the sake of practical action. Thus, there is animosity not only in social and political fields, but in the field of religion as well. Nationalism has developed in different parts of the world due to cultivation of nescience by the general people. No one considers that the tiny earth is just a lump of matter floating in immeasurable space along with many other lumps. In comparison to the vastness of space, these material lumps are like dust particles in the air. Because God has kindly made these lumps of matter complete in themselves, they are perfectly equipped with all necessities for floating in space. The drivers of our spaceships may be very proud of their achievements, but they do not consider the supreme driver of these greater, more gigantic spaceships called planets. Anybody else wants to read?
Yeah. Can someone else read?
Yes. Yes, Mataji. Yes, Mataji. There are unearthable suns and unearthable planetary systems also. Infinitesimal part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. We small creatures are trying to dominate these unlimited pastimes. Thus we take repeated birth and death, and we are gently frustrated by old age and diseases. The span of human life is scheduled for about 100 years, although it is gradually decreasing to 20 or 30 years. Thanks to the culture of nescience, before men had created their own nations with these planets in order to grasp sense and joy more effectively for these few years. Such a foolish people draw up various plans to render national democracies perfectly, a task that is totally impossible. Yet for this purpose, each and every nation had become a source of anxiety for others. More than 50% of nation's energy is devoted to defense measures and thus no one cares for cultivation of real knowledge. Yet people are falsely proud of being advanced in both material and spiritual knowledge.
Did we lose it?
The Isopnisad
Yes. Thank you.
this faulty type of education, and the Bhagavad Gita gives instruction as to the development of real knowledge. This mantra states that the instruction of Vidya, knowledge, must be acquired from a Dhira. A Dhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusion. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly situated, perfectly spiritually realized. at which time one neither hankers nor laments for anything. A Dhira realized that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association are but foreign elements. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain.
The material body and mind are bad bargains for spiritual entity. The living entity has actual functions in the living spiritual world, but this material world is dead. As long as the living spiritual sparks manipulate the dead lump of matter, the dead world appears to be a living world. Actually, it is the living souls, the part and parcel of the supreme living being, who move the world. The Dhiras have come to know all these facts by hearing them from superior authorities and have realized this knowledge by following the regulative principles. To follow the regulative principles, one must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. The transcendental message and regulative principles come down from the spiritual master to the disciple. Such knowledge does not come in the hazardous way of nascent education. One can become a Dhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. Arjuna, for example, became a Dhira by submissively hearing from Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead himself. Thus, the perfect disciple must be like Arjuna, and the spiritual master must be as good as the Lord himself. This is the process of learning Vidya, knowledge, from the Dhira, the undisturbed. Anybody would want to continue? I can read, Mataji. An Adhira, one who has not undergone the training of a Dhira, cannot be an instructive leader. Modern politicians who pose themselves as Dhiras are actually Adhiras, and one cannot expect perfect knowledge from them. They are simply busy seeing to their own remuneration in dollars and cents. How then can they lead the mass of people to the right path of self-realization? Thus, one must hear submissively from a Dhira in order to attain actual education.
Is that the end?
Yes, I think. That's a
Anyade
long
Vidya
purport.
Nyadahura Vidyaya Iti Shushumadhiranam Yenastadvi Chachakshire. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. I think it's interesting here how in the word for word, Srila Prabhupada translates dhira as sober, but in the translation, he translated as wise. Because dhira means sober and dhira means wise. The wise are sober and sobriety comes with knowledge. The dhira, they're not bewildered, having understood the difference between matter and spirit, having cultured knowledge. We also find the word dhira in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 13. Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. Dhiras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The sober person, the dhira, is not bewildered by such a change. He is not bewildered because he has cultured knowledge. He's cultured this true knowledge, real knowledge. He's a tattva darshivi. He sees the truth, having studied the nature of both the permanent and the non-permanent. Whereas by the culture of nescience or ignorance, one becomes more bewildered, one becomes more entangled in complicated meshes of material existence. What's that verse? Bhagavad Gita, chapter 244. Bogashwarya prasaktanam taya prahita chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhir samadona vidiyate. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence and are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. They remain averse to the service of the Lord. and therefore they enter into the darkest, they may enter into the darkest regions of ignorance. But from the culture of knowledge, vidya, one becomes wise, one becomes sober, and one can see clearly. As the Bhagavad Gita also states, that however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed. His knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. And I think it's really nice in this purport how Srila Prabhupada, he refers to chapter 13, text 8 through 12, the factors of knowledge. And instead of just listing those factors, he actually lists them in such a way of how to cultivate knowledge. I was going to read those. It's good for us to hear them. Chapter 13, text 8 through 12, begins with humility. The first factor of knowledge is humility. Humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. And for number one, humility, Srila Prabhupada says, one should himself become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. And in the purport of chapter 13, text 8 through 12, Prabhupada says that humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. One who knows he's not this body, anything, honor or dishonor pertaining to the body is useless. That's real humility. Understanding we're not the body, and any honor, dishonor pertaining to the body, it's useless. And for number two, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. That's pridelessness. We should strive to be sincere. We should not be a pretender and pose as more advanced than we are to gain recognition. And number three, one should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. This is ahimsa, or nonviolence. And so we can see from here that ahimsa is more than just not being harmful physically, but it's also mentally and spiritually. We should not put others in any type of distress or impede their spiritual progress in any way. Therefore, it behooves us to try our best to share spiritual knowledge with others so that others can become enlightened, and as well as ourselves, and leave this material world of distress. Number four, one should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. That is tolerance. Srila Prabhupada says that one's greatness has to be estimated by one's ability to tolerate provoking situations. That's how we can tell if one is great or not, is how he's not disturbed in the face of provocation. Number five, for simplicity, one should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. We should be simple and straightforward in all of our dealings. I once heard that a devotee has an open window, an open door, an open window, and an open heart. He has nothing to hide. Usually one is duplicitous when one has something to hide. He's not straightforward. And a devotee, it's best for them to be straightforward. That means simplicity in our dealings. Number 6, one should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. And one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. That sounds like Tadvidi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya from chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. That's how we learn the spiritual science, by approaching the bona fide spiritual master. Number 7, in order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. The rules and regulations, yam niyam, the do's and don'ts, they helped us to regulate ourselves and cultivate the mode of goodness. The rules and regulations are there for our protection, to protect us from the onslaught of Maya. And number, like we were talking about this morning, what's his name? Ugra Nishringa. He was mentioning how we wear kantimala and tilak, and we put the mantras on daily when we recite the mantras, put them on our body when we're putting on our tilak. It's all for protection. And the same goes for following the rules and regulations. It protects us from falling into Maya, from being influenced by the lure of nescience. And number 8 is one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. So that is to uphold Dharma. The tenets of the revealed scriptures are to help us uphold Dharma. The 4 pillars of Dharma, which by following the rules and regulations we are doing as well. The 4 pillars are cleanliness, austerity, truthfulness, and mercy. And the cleanliness means inside and out. Outside by showering and keeping the body clean, and inside by chanting the Maha Mantra and Gayatri mantras. They're meant for the inside, internal cleanliness. And these things are destroyed when we engage in illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. It destroys these 4 pillars. Number 9, one should completely refrain from practices that are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. This in the Bhagavad Gita is listed as steadiness. One has to be very determined to make spiritual progress, which means avoiding that which is not favorable to Krishna consciousness, which is one of the symptoms of surrender. The devotee, he accepts that which is favorable and rejects that which is unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. And number 10, for self-control, one should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. We are requested to accept enough to keep the body and soul together. Atyahara prayasas cha, from Nectar of Instruction. It recommends that we don't accept more than necessary, because it can be a distraction in our spiritual life. It can distract us from our Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada said that this, it begins with the tongue, learning to control the senses and just accept what's necessary. The tongue, by chanting japa and by taking prasadam, you can learn to control the urges. Number 11, one should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body or consider those who are related to his body to be his own. That's the absence of false ego. But we should focus on the development of our real ego, and then automatically the false ego is dissolved. We understand Aham Brahmasmi, I am not this body. Understand Krishna Nityadas, I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. And then our false ego will be dissolved. Number 12, one should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There's no use of making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. Yes, and we're meant to have a pessimistic view of the material world, to perceive the evils of birth, death, old age, and disease. Because unless we have this view, then there's, no impetus. Prabhupada says there's no impetus for us to make advancement in spiritual life if we don't have a pessimistic view of the evils of birth, death, old age, and disease. We won't want to get out of here if we're comfortable and everything is rosy here. Number 13, one should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement, and that is detachment. Again, simple living and high thinking. It's back to the Ishavasham principle. Accept our quota and not be diverted by trying to accumulate more than we require. We shouldn't over endeavor for material things. That's the Achahara again. Number 14, one should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordain. Prabhupada says that these wife, children, home, and the rest, they're natural objects of affection. But when they're not favorable for our progress in spiritual life, then we should cultivate detachment from them. It says not to be more attached. So I guess we shouldn't be less attached or more attached, but just what the scriptures ordain. Attached enough to do our duty. And but householder life, if the whole family is Krishna conscious, it can be very conducive for our spiritual life. We encourage one another and serve one another and help them in their Krishna consciousness. We're on 15. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables created by the mind. Matra sparshas to konteya sitoshna sukadukada agama paino nichas tams titiksha swabharata. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. One must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Also, there's another verse. What's that one? Prajahati yada kaman sarvam parto manogatan. Manogatan, mental concoction. It says here that we should not be distressed or happy over desirables or undesirables created by the mind. The mind concocts what's favorable, what's unfavorable for our sense gratification. But it's recommended that when a man gives up all varieties of sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he's said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. So, 16. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and serve him with rapt attention. This is like the verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anyabhilashita sunyam jnana karma anavritam anukulyena Krishna anushilanam bhaktir uttamam. That bhakti is not meant to be mixed. I mean, for pure devotional service, the bhakti should not be mixed with jnana and karma. It's unalloyed. It's free from these karma and jnana. It's pure and it should be favorable. And serve him with rapt attention. I remember reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam that about rapt attention, that no one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. And no one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. And no one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, hearing, and mating. Okay, we're on number 17. So in order to have rapt attention, we have to be dhira, we have to be sober. 17. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere favorable for spiritual culture. And one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. This is good advice for the coronavirus. You should not congregate. But for our spiritual life, for our own personal practice, for our own communion with God, with Krishna, there's some privacy is conducive for that. The small groups of like-minded practitioners can help one to focus generally more on our spiritual practices and go deeper in our spiritual life. Whereas when we're in larger crowds, often it can serve as a distraction, from our spiritual practices. Except for preaching, that's a different thing. For preaching, we go to the congested cities, the heart of the city, to spread Krishna consciousness, to have Harinam Sankirtan, go where the people are. And 18, one should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. So Krishna consciousness is a spiritual science. Prabhupada has said that repeatedly. It's a science of self-realization, the science of God realization. We should analyze the difference between matter and spirit. We should understand how the presence of spirit activates matter. And even though the spirit is tiny, it's in the Shastras, it says that it's 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. You take a piece of hair and the tip of it is so small you can hardly see it, but the spirit soul is 1/10,000th that size. And that illuminates this whole body, the spirit soul, and activates it. Also, we need the presence of the super soul. But when the soul leaves this body, the body is nothing but a lump of matter. And we also should analyze the scriptures. The scriptures are there for our experimentation or our application in our lives. And that, so it is a science, just as anything, the science that the scientists are saying is science, we can apply the same principles in spiritual life. You gather information and you experiment and you see the results, you judge by the results, apply it in our life. All these 18 factors aid in the cultivation of vidya, or knowledge, real knowledge. Any questions on this so far? This is a very long purport, and we've only done these 18 numbers so far. No comments or questions? When we were reading the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commenting on all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy. And I was actually reading in the Sharanagati, and I believe I came across that song. It's actually a song in the Sharanagati called, I think it's called Vidyara Bilase, because in here he mentions, can I read it? It's really nice. Of course, he takes the position of a conditioned soul, but it goes, I'll just read the English. Confidentially, I spent my time in the pleasures of mundane learning and never worshipped your lotus feet, O Lord. Now you are my only shelter. Reading on and on, my hopes grew, for I considered material knowledge to be life's true path. How fruitless was that hope, and how feeble that knowledge proved to be. I know now that all such knowledge is ignorance. Knowledge of this world is knowledge born of your illusory energy, Maya. It impedes devotional service and makes an ass of the eternal soul by encouraging his infatuation with this temporary world. Here is one such ass who for as here is one such ass who for so long has carried on his back the burden of material existence. Now in my old age, for want of the power to enjoy, nothing pleases me. Life has become agony now. My knowledge has proven itself worthless, and ignorance has penetrated my heart with the intolerable burning pain of a pointed shaft. O Lord, I seek no other treasure in this world than your lotus feet. Bhaktivinoda abandons everything to make them the sum and substance of his life. I believe that's the one he was referring to, because he mentions that this world is knowledge born of your illusory energy, Maya, and that it makes an ass of the eternal soul. And that's what he says here. Yeah. I believe that's
I liked that somewhere it said that the boys of this age think they know everything and are headaches to their elders or something.
Oh, I know, because there's no training, you know.
I know, and it's like
they trained.
The young people think they know everything. They think like elders are like fools telling them something, you know. And it's not just boys these days; it's girls too, you know.
Right. There's so much in this purport.
Yeah, every time you tell them, they feel like, you know, like it's why are you, you know, like they know everything, you know.
Yeah.
It's like topsy-turvy, you know what I'm saying?
But that's, what do they know? What is their knowledge about?
It's the world. It's the worldly illusionary knowledge, exactly.
Right. And
but they have no interest in knowing they think they know everything because they are learned in the material sense, you know.
Yeah, and oftentimes it takes some kicking of that material energy, you know.
I know. I remember one of my Christian,
unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember one of my Christian friends telling me that. Remember that you know, that Christian group that I was meeting with, you know, the ladies, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling me, like, sometimes they pray to Jesus Christ that my children suffer so they'll come to Christ. You know what I'm saying? And then she said, like, but I hate to pray that way. Of course, I want them to come to Christ without suffering, you know. But I could relate to her, you know what I'm saying?
Well, it says in Bhagavad Gita, suffering is purification. You know, it really,
I know, but generally nobody wants to pray for suffering, you know.
No,
I mean,
Queen Kunti.
Queen Kunti, right. We have an example.
She understands when we suffer, we think of God, you know.
I know.
It humbles one. It actually humbles one, because you see, I'm not, you know, the control.
But lowly folks like us and listen don't generally pray for suffering.
Right. I know.
But I thought this Christian lady was actually quite advanced in thinking that way, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting how Prabhupada uses the word satanic, you know, in this purport for demoniac problems of the world. You know, it's satanic, and this satanic, you know, it's satanic thinking.
No, he says that the politicians say that they're satanic, but they don't do anything about it. It says in the verse, you know.
They don't know what to do. They have
so even these Christian conservative these Christian conservative politicians, they think that they are holding the moral high ground, but really they're not doing anything. You know, they're just being fanatical about it. That's all.
Exactly. Fanaticism.
It's just fanaticism. They think they have holding the higher conservative Christian moral high ground, but it's just merely fanaticism, you know. They're really not interested in the practical. In fact, the verse says that they're not interested in a practical application, you know.
Right. And that's why we have to approach a dhira, you know, one who understands the truth. He has the solutions, all the world's problems. He knows the solution. Even Einstein said that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. You know, he was pretty wise in some matters. He's known as one of the great thinkers, you know, of our time. But the Dhira, because they have the senses controlled, you know, the Vachovegam, Manasakrodavegam, they're not moved by the urges of the senses. Their senses are controlled, you know, and they've heard the truth. Iti Shushuma they've assimilated, you know, they've realized it, they practice it, and therefore they can share it, you know, with the world. They have the solutions for these problems, spiritual solutions for material problems. That's one of the chapters in the science of self-realization.
Science of self-discovery, I think, right?
I thought it was science of self-realization, but one of the books. Prabhupada,
Yeah, it's a self-discovery because I was just recently reading it. Yeah.
the police officer, you know, the crime in Chicago, you know, what can we do? Prabhupada said, give us the time, you know, give us the space. We can, we'll have kirtan with them. We'll give them prashadam, and this can help solve all the problems in the world. But they don't have faith in this.
Mm-hmm.
They've have more faith in nescience, culture of nescience.
But it's a hard thing to understand how many dhiras are there in this material world. You know?
How many dhiras?
Yeah.
Well, the bona fide spiritual master, he's dhira.
Right.
You know, Vachovegam, Manasakrodavegam, one who controls the urge of this mind, the actions of anger, tolerate the urge of the speech, mind, what actions of anger, the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. He's qualified to make disciples all over the world. You know, he's qualified to be the bona fide spiritual master. He's the dhira. He's a sober person.
Mm-hmm.
He's no longer perplexed by Maya, by nescience. And that's why one of the factors of knowledge is approaching a bona fide spiritual master, inquiring from him and rendering service to him, unto him. And just like Arjuna, we should accept all that he says. I totally accept his truth, all that you have told me. And now I'm ready to act, you know, and then act on his instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And this Purport also talks about in this age of Kali, you know, now we may live, if we're lucky, to 100 years, but by the end of it, you'll be at a ripe old age if you live to be 20. And
wow,
it's
that
going to
seems so harsh.
There's so much dissension and quarrel now, you know, there's going to be so much.
I know, it's so hard to imagine anything worse than this.
Yeah.
And it will be much, much worse than this.
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking about that when you said that. Living to the age of 20 might be a merciful thing in those times.
Yeah.
Right? If shorter life would be better.
You know, Prabhupada told Allen Ginsberg, he told him, in the end of Kali, I will eat you and you will eat me. That's how the state people will come to, you know, the ignorance, the nescience will be so cultured, you know, people will have children to eat them, you know, so that's why we want to cultivate knowledge now and hopefully have a brighter future.
And one of those 18 statements that you read, in one of them, it says, we have to understand that we are not this body. And even those that are related to this body are illusory.
Yeah, Prabhupada calls them extensions of the body. You know, they're extensions of our body. We have to give up a identification with those too. They're individuals. And the way to do it is see it as all belonging to Krishna. You know, even in family life, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he saw all his family members as belonging to Krishna and that he should serve them in that light. They're meant for Krishna's enjoyment. So any other comments, questions, extensions? You can see I got a little remnant from the program. It's maybe program.
Oh.
I forgot that was today, so I feel very bad if Sridevi Priya is listening.
Oh, yeah.
I lose track of what day it is. And, if I'm not working, it's like it could be any day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get the flower in my bag.
Oh, I don't know. What's her name? Shuddha Bhakti stopped by, and maybe she had it. She just gave it to my husband.
Mhm. But when Jaira, they said it might be merciful if you, at that time, to die at a young age, right? That's what you said, Jaira, right? Is Jaira on mute? That's what she
Sorry,
said, right?
couldn't find my button. Yeah, that was what I was saying. It's, because we have to live so many lifetimes. Maybe it's a mercy that they're short at that time.
Right,
You only have
but
to endure
I
so
remember when
many
you
of
said
them.
that Gopi Prema had related to me an incident that happened to her mother. Her mother had lost a young child. I don't remember what age, but a relatively young age, I think less than 5, years old. And the mother was very distressed and lamenting, of course. And then she had a dream that the child would have died at a much later age, and she would have suffered. I think it was relatively young, I think maybe a toddler or something, that she would have had a lot more memories, that the child would have died much later.
Wow.
And that that it was merciful that to her that it died at such a young age.
Yeah, see, we can't see the whole picture.
We can't see the whole picture. And I think then she had a little bit of relief from her lamentation.
Yeah. It's interesting. We got a call from Mother Polly, and she's in a nursing home, and she was on the first floor, and the people weren't so nice. They were a little demanding and expecting her to, I don't know, move quicker and stuff. And she's like 97 years old.
I know, right?
And then one girl even pulled her hand and bruised it and everything. And it was getting really frustrating. Like, why am I having to go through this,
Right.
But it so happens she asked to be moved to the second floor. Okay. And just after getting there to the second floor, she met 3 ladies who had been to India, and they saw her. They saw her beads. Her son passed away, and she got his japa beads.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and she has a murti of Prabhupada that her grandson, when he visited India, sent to her. She has a Prabhupada murti on her bookshelf there. And so these 3 ladies, they've been to India and they want to talk to her. They're really nice. And then one of the nurses came in and she had to give her something. And she looked and she said, I know him. And so she knows of Prabhupada, and she told her name. And so it's like she had to go through that maybe, to get up to the second floor of this place. Krishna takes care. Huh? Krishna takes care. We just have to be patient,
Yeah.
He really takes care. She rendered some nice.
And there was something, I think Ugra Narasimha said today that I liked very much. He said that Krishna takes care of your devotional service. Not necessarily, like he said, just because you have your japa beads and your kantimala and your this, it doesn't mean that if your car hits a truck or something, you're going to be saved all the time. He said that very straight. But he said what Krishna takes care of is your devotional service. He protects your devotional service, if you're surrendered to him. Right. So I like that statement that we think that if Krishna doesn't protect us in some material sense, oh, Krishna has let me down, So it's not necessarily that Krishna is protecting.
Not necessarily, but oftentimes he does. Devotees are in like near car accidents. They chant.
Right.
There's a car in front of us once. We're driving and it flipped over. We were following devotees and they swerved off and it flipped over. And the devotees were fine. They chanted Hare Krishna and just one got a bump on his head and not too bad, and
I know. We were on 91 one time, my husband and I, and there was some crazy person crossing the highway, running across. and he missed our car and the next car hit him. And I was like screaming, Krishna. I mean, not that, that was a nice thing. It wasn't a nice thing for the person who was hit, but I was thinking at least, I didn't want to hit him.
But it's not that we should expect that, because we're in a place
Yeah.
where birth, death, old age, and disease is the given. It's all around us, and it is
But
going to happen.
But then again, Jiva, we see so many devotees suffering too. You know what I'm saying? So you can't expect material suffering to not be there.
Right, exactly. That's what I was saying. We're in the material world, so it's a given. It's a problematic place, and it's the birth, death, old age, and disease are here. And
Right, but
so,
because they are in Krishna conscious, then they're staying above that fray,
But for the pure devotee, he's not affected by these things
at all. I know. Wouldn't that be nice?
Don't,
Yeah.
Their internal life is so developed,
And steady and
them.
unshaken. Yeah, like the ocean, like you said today. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's after 8.
Oh, is it? I got to get to my another class.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Jiva. Thank you.
Krishna, thank you. Any other comments, questions? But the devotee approaches Krishna for everything, knowing he's the controller behind everything. I was thinking when Prabhupada was young, he would even pray to Krishna to help him fly his kite, and not to make the watermelon grow in his belly when he swallowed a watermelon seed. That's being Krishna conscious, seeing Krishna's behind everything in our life. And that it's all good, seeing it as not is not seeing the full picture, and oftentimes we can't see the full picture. Okay. So that was mantra 11. We're a little over halfway now. We'll offer obeisances and see you next time. Mantrakalpatubhischa, Kripa Sindhu, Bhayavacha, Patitanam, Bhavaya Vaishnavaya Namaha. Hare Krishna.